Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Today I am going to give a reading of some poetry by Thomas Hardy. After a little bit of exposition, which you certainly may feel inclined to skip ahead of. Or fast forward through. So this is one in a series of videos that I have done. I believe I started this trend with some poems by W.H. Auden. Then I did 4 videos by William Butler Yeats. And the natural follow-up to those was A.E. Housman, and I did that. There have been requests for more, and it seemed to me that Thomas Hardy is the next natural step. These 4 books here, the poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins, the collected shorter poems of W.H. Auden, the collected poems of A.E. Housman, and collected poems of Thomas Hardy, are 4 books which I inherited from an old friend. So something of a mentor to me when I was at University of Illinois, Chicago Circle campus. We met in a class by Chicago poet Paul Carroll, who also had an outsized influence upon my life. I will put Hopkins aside. I just thought that I would show these books. I have thought about doing a video in some way, shape, or form talking about my big books of poets. I have a handful such as the Yeats, which I got myself. Throughout most of my life, as far as Auden goes, I have been reliant upon what is found in the anthologies. I have a good variety of anthologies, and it has always seemed to suffice for me. With Housman, I always had an edition of his well-known book, A Shropshire Lad, which contains his best poems. The collected contains a fair number of other poems, but he was not a hugely voluminous writer. So with just A Shropshire Lad, you had the essential Housman. Hardy is a different matter. Well, let me pull out Hardy, since Hardy is the poet du jour, and I'll put them back so that you have the visual interest of some books of poetry. Hardy was a voluminous writer. Unfortunately, in the process of working up to this video, the jacket of this old edition has come apart in various ways. Whoops. It was perfectly fine on my shelf in the decades since it has been in my possession. My good friend died about 10 years ago and put me in charge of dispersing her library, and expected me and requested me to take any books for myself that I cared to possess. And so I did. These are the 4 poetry books that I took. This book, Thomas Hardy, this must be the same edition that I read when I was young. I borrowed it from this friend. We are talking probably 40 or more years ago, possibly 42, something like that, years ago, that I borrowed the book and read the complete works of Thomas Hardy. I have not gone back to Hardy since, relying, as with Auden, on the anthology pieces. I don't believe I have come into contact with so many of Hardy in the anthologies, but he was a poet, having read all of this, that I felt contented to let it rest with the most popular. So when I decided to sit down and pick out some poems to read for this occasion, it was not so easy as with, say, Yeats. Yeats I'm pretty familiar with. I got 4 videos together out of the book. I will put links to these things in the description box. I'm familiar with Yeats pretty well, so picking and choosing was not a problem. With Auden, I'm less familiar, but Auden wrote a lot of subpar poetry, let us say. And the good thing with Auden is that you can tell right off. You can just take a quick glance through the pages and you know. Hardy is a very different matter. I think that his truly great poems number few, but a lot of his poems are pretty good, but they are very hard to pick out. You have to really go in depth and give them a solid reading. There's a lot of arcane vocabulary, so you find the occasional word in Houseman. Hardy is a different matter. And so when I opened up the book to undertake the task of selecting poems, I was a little bit intimidated. But I noticed right at the top that a lot of his poems, a lot of his early poems were sonnets. I think he moved away from the form. But that gave me kind of the wedge into his work. And I thought, well, I will just pull out his sonnets, because the sonnet form is well known, and it is a great vehicle for a lesser poet to use to create a strong poem, because the sonnet form itself is muscular, let us say. And so I focused myself on the sonnets which he wrote, but I looked at everything in the first, 150 pages. And immediately I opted against long poems. I think Hardy was one of these poets who can just let the stanzas roll. I myself am that sort of poet, and being prolific, one can just ooze this stuff out. It is not always so good for the reader who encounters the verses. So opting for short pieces seemed right. You have then the pitfall or the stumbling block in this reading, in that I'm not familiar with his poems that well. I remember nothing from the reading 43 years ago. And of course, 43 years ago, I had only begun to start writing poetry. I had probably been at it less than 10 years. when I read this. I date the achievement of my mature style to, I don't know, age 28, 29, age 30, something like that. I didn't keep a journal and note it down. But so at the time I was reading this, I may well not even have known what a sonnet was. That's how early in my course that I encountered Hardy. I would suspect that I knew what a sonnet was, but I doubt that I recognized them in the book. And then not being familiar with these poems, and then the language sometimes being arcane or abstruse or convoluted even, it's just harder for me to come at it blindly and read one of these poems. So I've had to actually go through the poems that I picked out a couple of times. I still expect to have some stumbles along the way. I know that you are accustomed to coming to my channel and getting the best poetry. This is not going to be one of those readings. The poetry that I have picked out will be good enough, and it will be of interest, but it is not always entirely possible to even figure out what Hardy is trying to say. That's not necessarily a deficit in poetry, but I think that over the years I probably was well to just adhere to those few anthology pieces. So I've spent more time with this and only gotten maybe a quarter of the way through the book. I expect I could do 3 more readings as with William Butler Yeats, but it would require an awful lot of work to do, and then you're still not going to get the excellent poems that you have with William Butler Yeats. So for me, maybe it is something I will consider for the future, but not for right now. If you have read any Thomas Hardy novels, you will note that they can sometimes be somewhat depressive. I've only read one, and it was excruciating in spots. Well, having spent all of this time with these poems by Hardy, I've realized that there is almost an insurmountable sadness to come from his poems. Not surprising, so I think it must pertain to Hardy the man. The poems of Yeats, I did not feel that with. You do feel the strength, you do feel the liveliness, you do feel the insight into humanity, but the poems by Yeats were not excruciatingly sad. They were sometimes poignant. This, I say excruciatingly sad. On first reading, you may not feel that, or first hearing in this case. As I say, with Hardy, it's more of a cumulative thing, because in many of the poems, it's hard to even figure out what he's driving at. So I will begin. I have these poems marked out, and I'm guessing that the book takes things in something of chronological order. The first, it looks like it's from a book called Wessex Poems and Other Verses. I don't know if this means that it was poems which he used in his novels. Indeed, some of them are in other voices than Hardy the poet. But I don't know He is said to have started writing poetry after he retired from novels. I would suppose he wrote poems occasionally before that. And as I say, I will be reading a lot of sonnets, but I have put in a few other non-sonnets just for curiosity's sake. And then there are 3 poems which I think would be considered of that higher order, so as to find their way into anthologies, at least anthologies of my day. And so 3 of them are poems which I have a long time familiarity with. The sonnets, less so. I wasn't even aware that he had written them, even though I must have read them. This one is, and unlike these other books, the font here is real small, so I may have to really squint to get this. And then the book is old, and at some parts it's almost as if the ink has dropped off, so you can't see the full letter. But I think I can manage okay. So some sonnets, and if it's not a sonnet, you will probably hear regardless, or maybe I will flag that to your attention. Hap. If but some vengeful god would call to me from up the sky and laugh, "Thou suffering thing, know that thy sorrow is my ecstasy, that thy love's loss is my hate's profiting," then would I bear it, clench myself, and die, steeled by the sense of ire unmerited, half eased in that a powerfuller than I had willed and meted me the tears I shed. But not so. How arrives it joy lies slain, and why unblooms the best hope ever sown? Crass casualty obstructs the sun and rain, and dicing time for gladness casts a moan. These purblind doomsters had as readily strown blisses about my pilgrimage as pain. 1866. So the strength of the sonnet form shines through. He often employs something of an irregular sonnet form, in that the octet will be Shakespearean, and then the sestet some other thing, or sometimes he will do the ABBA and then sort of CDDC sort of formulation, or there might be some kind of an odd overlap in the rhymes. So not quite secure in himself as a sonneteer, but regardless, the sonnet form makes allowances for all kinds of foibles and permutations. Some of these just have the a section of the first line used as the title, and you will know that if that's the case, because you will hear it twice. In vision I roamed. 2. In vision I roamed the flashing firmament, so fierce in blazon that the night waxed wan, as though with awe at orbs of such ostent. And as I thought, my spirit ranged on and on in footless traverse through ghast heights of sky to the last chambers of the monstrous dome, where stars the brightest here are lost to the eye. Then any spot on our own earth seemed home. And the sick grief that you were far away grew pleasant thankfulness that you were near, who might have been set on some foreign sphere, less than a want to me, as day by day I lived unaware, uncaring all that lay locked in that universe, taciturn and drear. 1866. At a bridal, nature's indifference. When you paced forth to await maternity, a dream of other offspring held my mind, compounded of us twain as love designed, rare forms that corporate now will never be. Should I, too, wed as slave to mode's decree, and each thus found a part of false desire, a stolid line, whom no high aims will fire, as had fired ours, could ever have mingled we. And grieved that lives so matched should miscompose, each mourn the double waste, and question dare to the great dame whence incarnation flows, why those high-purposed children never were. What will she answer? That she does not care if the race all such sovereign types unknows. Not quite sure what he's saying, but I think the thought is fairly mundane in that, even though the language fluffs it up a bit. A confession to a friend in trouble. Your troubles shrink not, though I feel them less here far away than when I tarried near. I even smile old smiles with listlessness, yet smiles they are, not ghastly mockeries mere. A thought too strange to house within my brain, haunting its outer precincts, I discern, that I will not show zeal again to learn your griefs, and sharing them renew my pain. It goes like murky bird or buccaneer that shapes its lawless figure on the main, and staunchness tends to banish utterly the unseemly instinct that had lodgment there here. Yet, comrade old, can bitterer knowledge be than that, though banned, such instinct was in me? And this is titled She, it's in the voice of a woman, she at his funeral. They bear him to his resting place, in slow procession sweeping by. I follow at a stranger's space, his kindred they, his sweetheart I. Unchanged my gown of garish dye, though sable sad is their attire. But they stand round with griefless eye, whilst my regret consumes like fire. The next four are all titled She to Him. So they are to be read together, but they all are given that title individually as well. So I will just read them as I find them. Oh, wait, I'm skipping a sonnet. There's a sonnet titled Revulsion. Though I waste watches, framing words to fetter some unknown spirit to mine in clasp and kiss, out of the night there looms a sense 'twere better to fail obtaining whom one fails to miss. For winning love, we win the risk of losing, and losing love is as one's life were riven. It cuts like contumely and keen ill-using to cede what was superfluously given. Let me then never feel the fateful thrilling that devastates the love-worn wooer's frame, the hot adieu of fevered hopes, the chilling that agonizes disappointed aim. So may I live no junctive law fulfilling, and my heart's table bear no woman's name. 1866. Well, I will not keep telling you the dates. Hardy married twice, and I read the biography of Hardy written by his widow, or I should say perhaps allegedly written by his widow. I came across something many years later that suggested that he wrote it himself and thinly disguised it as a biography when it really was autobiographical, and then it was attributed to his widow. I don't know the story of that. I enjoyed it very much, but I remember none of it. That's how long ago it was. I may well have still been living with my parents at that time. So this really is taking it back. So now we get to the four. She to him. 1. When you shall see me in the toils of time, my lauded beauties carried off from me, my eyes no longer stars as in their prime, my name forgot of maiden fair and free. When in your being heart concedes to mind, and judgment, though you scarce its process know, recalls the excellencies I once enshrined, and you are irked that they have withered so. Remembering mine, the loss is not the blame, that sportsman time but rears his brood to kill, knowing me in my soul the very same, one who would die to spare you touch of ill. Will you not grant to old affection's claim the hand of friendship down life's sunless hill? She to him. 2. Perhaps long hence, when I have passed away, some other's feature, accent, thought like mine will carry you back to what I used to say, and bring some memory of your love's decline. Then you may pause a while and think, poor jade, and yield a sigh to me, as ample due, not as the tittle of a debt unpaid to one who could resign her all to you. And thus reflecting, you will never see that your thin thought in 2 small words conveyed was no such fleeting phantom thought to me, but the whole life wherein my part was played, and you amid its fitful masquerade, a thought as I in your life seem to be. She to him. 3. I will be faithful to thee, I will, and death shall choose me with a wondering eye, that he did not discern and domicile one his by right ever since that last goodbye. I have no care for friends or kin or prime of manhood who deal gently with me here, amid the happy people of my time who work their love's fulfillment. I appear numb as a vein that cankers on its point, true to the wind that kissed ere canker came, despised by souls of now who would disjoint the mind from memory, making life all aim, my old dexterities in witchery gone, and nothing left for love to look upon. she to him for. This love puts all humanity from me. I can but maledict her, pray her dead, for giving love and getting love of thee, feeding a heart that else mine own had fed. How much I love I know not, life not known, save as one unit I would add love by. But this I know, my being is but thine own, fused from its separateness by ecstasy. And thus I grasp thy amplitudes of her ungrasped, though helped by nigh regarding eyes. Canst thou then hate me as an envier, who see unwrecked what I so dearly prize? Believe me, lost one, love is lovelier, the more it shapes its moan in selfish wise. Do you follow that? Oh, this is kind of a nice one in its way. It took me a couple of read-throughs to get the sense of it. It's called The Ivy Wife, and it's about, and spoken from the point of view of an ivy that grew clingingly around a beech tree. I don't know that people write this kind of thing anymore. The Ivy Wife. I longed to love a full-boughed beech and be as high as he. I stretched an arm within his reach and signaled unity. But with his drip he forced a breach and tried to poison me. I gave the grasp of partnership to one of other race. A plane he barked him strip by strip from upper bough to base, and me therewith, for gone my grip, my arms could not enlace. In new affection next I strove to call an ash I saw, and he in trust received my love, till with my soft green claw I clamped and bound him as I wove. Such was my love, ha ha. By this I gained his strength and height without his rivalry. But in my triumph I lost sight of afterhaps. Soon he, being bark-bound, flagged, snapped, fell outright, and in his fall felled me. So, I mean, a curiosity, I think, enjoyable in its way once you accept its terms, I guess. To a lady offended by a book of the writer's. Now that my page is exiled, doomed, maybe never to press thy cozy cushions more, or wake thy ready yeas as heretofore, or stir thy gentle vows of faith in me. Knowing thy natural receptivity, I figure that as flambeaux banish eve, my somber image, warped by insidious heave of those less forthright, must lose place in thee. So be it. I have borne such. Let thy dreams of me and mine diminish day by day, and yield their space to shine of smugger things, till I shape to thee but in fitful gleams, and then in far and feeble visitings, and then surcease. Truth will be truth alway. Okay, we come upon one of the great ones. I look into my glass. I look into my glass and view my wasting skin, and say, would God it came to pass, my heart had shrunk as thin. For then I, undistressed, by hearts grown cold to me, could lonely wait my endless rest with equanimity. But time to make me grieve part steals, lets part abide, and shakes this fragile frame at eve with throbbings of noontide. The next are from Poems of the Past and Present. I don't know if that's a section of a book or a book in its own right. I guess it's a book in its own right. And I thought I would just, to change it up a little bit, read the preface. Herewith I tender my thanks to the editors and proprietors of the Times, the Morning Post, the Daily Chronicle, the Westminster Gazette, Literature, the Graphic, Cornhill, Sphere, and other papers for permission to reprint from their pages such of the following pieces of verse as have already been published. Of the subject matter of this volume, even that which is in other than narrative form, much is dramatic or impersonative, even where not explicitly so. Moreover, that portion which may be regarded as individual comprises a series of feelings and fancies written down in widely differing moods and circumstances, and at various dates. It will probably be found, therefore, to possess little cohesion of thought or harmony of coloring. I do not greatly regret this. Unadjusted impressions have their value, and the road to a true philosophy of life seems to lie in humbly recording diverse readings of its phenomena as they are forced upon us by chance and change. T.H., August 1901. And again, we'll get back to some sonnets and other things thrown in. This first section is titled War Poems. Embarkation, Southampton Docks, October 1899. Here, where Vespasian's legions struck the sands, and Cerdic with his Saxons entered in, and Henry's army leapt afloat to win convincing triumphs over neighbor lands. Vaster battalions press for further strands, to argue in the selfsame bloody mode, which this late age of thought and pact and code still fails to mend. Now deckward tramp the bands, yellow as autumn leaves, alive as spring. And as each host draws out upon the sea, beyond which lies the tragical to be, none dubious of the cause, none murmuring, wives, sisters, parents, wave white hands and smile, as if they knew not that they weep the while. And another. Departure, Southampton Docks, October 1899. While the far farewell music thins and fails, and the broad bottom rips, let me start that one again. Excuse me, my nose is itching me. Departure, Southampton Docks, October 1899. While the far farewell music thins and fails, and the broad bottoms rip the bearing brine, all smalling slowly to the gray sea line, and each significant red smoke shaft pales. Keen sense of severance everywhere prevails, which shapes the late long tramp of mounting men to seeming words that ask and ask again. How long, O striving Teutons, Slavs, and Gales, must your wroth reasonings trade on lives like these, that are as puppets in a playing hand? When shall the saner, softer polities, whereof we dream, have sway in each proud land, and patriotism, grown godlike, scorn to stand bondslave to realms, but circle earth and seas? In a couple of places throughout, there are bits of the ginkgo leaf, and I just smushed one here from obviously at least half century ago. We have a ginkgo next door, and I should pick some up next autumn. So the next several are pertaining to a trip which Hardy took to Rome in 1887, apparently. If I remembered the biography, I might have remembered these. And so we've got 3 sonnets and then something else pertaining to Rome. In the Old Theatre, Fiesole, April 1887. I traced the circus whose gray stones incline, where Rome and dim Etruria interjoin, till came a child who showed an ancient coin that bore the image of a Constantine. She lightly passed, nor did she once opine how better than all books she had raised for me in swift perspective Europe's history through the vast years of Caesar's sceptred line. For in my distant plot of English loam, 'twas but to delve, and straightway there to find coins of like impress, as with one half blind whom common simples cure, her act flashed home in that mute moment to my opened mind, the power, the pride, the reach of perished Rome. I'm reading this on a day in which the body politic of much of the world is reeling from the abdication of any duties that my country felt it had to Europe. Big changes are afoot. That is another reason why I don't think I will do any more of Hardy after this. His poems in themselves are, as I say, just almost intolerably sad. And there's enough sadness in the world right now. In the first presidency, the first term of this administration, voices of hate were stirred up against Chinese people, and there were so many attacks all over the place. As yet, that note has not been sounded, but the note has been sounded quite vociferously against trans people, and the attacks have begun. So we are seeing cause for sadness left and right in all the 4 directions, and so I don't need to be reading stuff that just adds to it. Now, poetry can serve a high function in putting form to grief, to sorrow, to sadness. And so in these trying times, these times of witnessed scenes of atrocity, let's say, you may well find your solace in one of these poems or this sort of thing. For myself, I think because of having been in the game for so long, so to speak, I have written poetry for a long time. I don't take my solace in poetry these days. I would probably be better going to a piece of music, that sort of thing. So anyhow, Rome on the Palatine, April 1887. We walked where Victor Jove was shrined a while, and passed in, sorry, I'll do it again. The font is small, and yet it's kind of hard to, well, Rome on the Palatine, April 1887. We walked where Victor Jove was shrined a while, and passed to Livia's rich red mural show, whence thridding cave and crypto portico we gained Caligula's dissolving pile. And each ranked ruin tended to beguile the outer sense, and shape itself as though it wore its marble gleams, its pristine glow of scenic frieze and pompous peristyle. When lo, swift hands on strings nigh overhead began to melodize a waltz by Strauss. It stirred me as I stood in Caesar's house, raised the old routes imperial lyres had led, and blended pulsing life with lives long done, till time seemed fiction, past and present one. It sometimes takes a few read-throughs to really get his sense. I don't think readers of the future will have time for that. I certainly don't know that I have time for it anymore. Rome, building a new street in the ancient quarter, April 1887. These umbered cliffs and gnarls of masonry outskeleton time's central city, Rome, whereof each arch and tablature and dome lies bare in all its gaunt anatomy. And cracking frieze and rotten metope express as though they were an open tome, top lined with caustic monitory gnome. Dunces learn here to spell humanity. And yet within these ruins very shade, the singing workmen shape and set and join their frail new mansions stuccoed cove and coin, with no apparent sense that years abrade. Though each rent wall their feeble works invade, once shamed all such in power of peer and groin. It's sort of an incidental poem. I think every writer must go through it. You're visiting somewhere and you see the workmen building a house or something, and got to write a poem about that. I have books entirely of that kind of stuff. I think it's all necessary steps upon the road. So the next one is an interesting one, not a sonnet. Touching upon poetry. And in Rome, there is a pyramid of a guy named Cestius. John David might say Cestius. I think that might be the new way to say Cs, but at least in Hardy's day, I think they would have said Cestius. So there is a pyramid in Rome. I've never seen it. It is near the graves of Shelley and Keats. I've never been to their graves. But the poem is endearing in its way. Rome. At the pyramid of Cestius, near the graves of Shelley and Keats, 1887. Who, then, was Cestius, and what is he to me? Amid thick thoughts and memories multitudinous, one thought alone brings he. I can recall no word of anything he did. For me, he is a man who died and was interred to leave a pyramid whose purpose was expressed not with its first design, nor till far down in time beside it found their rest two countrymen of mine. Cestius in life may be slew, breathed out threatening, I know not. This I know. In death all silently he does a finer thing. In beckoning pilgrim feet with marble finger high to where by shadowy wall and history-haunted street those matchless singers lie. Say then he lived and died, that stones which bear his name should mark through time where two immortal shades abide. It is an ample fame. Of course, we all wind up going to oblivion. The names of Shelley and Keats, I am sure, mean much less than the gaudy sight of the pyramid, let's say, to most of the visitors to the neighborhood. Interestingly enough, that first stanza, who then was Cestius, and what is he to me? Amid thick thoughts and memories multitudinous, one thought alone brings he. A lovely stanza, but it just reminds me of a certain pedantic booktuber at times who announced to everybody that you should never use the word multitudinous in a poem. Well, Hardy did. Hardy's vocabulary, if you haven't picked it up by now, in these poems is all over the place. And some of the vocabulary, some of the words have not aged well and have fallen to clunkers. But I think it is the poet's want to expand the vocabulary of his poems, not to constrain it. Now this, I think, is something about folks who climbed the Matterhorn. It's Zermatt, to the Matterhorn, June, July, 1897. 32 years since, up against the sun, 7 shapes, thin atomies to lower sight, laboringly leapt and gained thy gable height, and 4 lives paid for what the seven had won. They were the first by whom the deed was done, and when I look at thee, my mind takes flight to that day's tragic feat of manly might, as though till then of history thou hadst none. Yet ages ere men topped thee, late and soon, thou didst behold the planets lift and lower. Saw'st maybe Joshua's pausing sun and moon, and the betokening sky when Caesar's power approached its bloody end, yea, even that noon when darkness filled the earth till the 9th hour. That probably should have been lift and lower now that I think of it. So he did lower, power, and hour, but I would guess it was lower. I was thinking he was being real strict. That sort of surprises me. Well, let me read it again the other way. So he's addressing the mountain to the Matterhorn. 32 years since, up against the sun, 7 shapes, thin atomies to lower sight, laboringly leapt and gained thy gabled height, and 4 lives paid for what the 7 had won. They were the first by whom the deed was done, and when I look at thee, my mind takes flight to that day's tragic feat of manly might, as though till then of history thou hadst none. Yet ages ere men topped thee, late and soon, thou didst behold the planets lift and lower. Saw'st, maybe, Joshua's pausing sun and moon, and the betokening sky when Caesar's power approached its bloody end. Yea, even that noon when darkness filled the earth till the 9th hour. I don't think our contemporary poetry attempts such grandness, does it? This next sonnet kind of follows a pace with that one. I can't say that I'm really smitten with it, but it's still interesting. At a lunar eclipse, the shadow earth from pole to central sea now steals along upon the moon's meek shrine. No, sorry, got it wrong. I see we're dragging on. I really didn't predict how long this was going to go. We're coming to the end, though. So I'm getting tired. It's a bit of a strenuous effort reading Hardy. At a lunar eclipse, thy shadow earth from pole to central sea now steals along upon the moon's meek shine, in even monochrome and curving line of imperturbable serenity. How shall I link such sun-cast symmetry with the torn, troubled form I know as thine, that profile placid as a brow divine, with continents of moil and misery? And can immense mortality but throw so small a shade, and heaven's high human scheme be hemmed within the coasts yon arc implies? Is such the stellar gauge of earthly show, nation at war with nation, brains that teem, heroes and women fairer than the skies? This one was unusual, I thought. The problem. Shall we conceal the case or tell it we who believe the evidence. Here and there the watchtowers knell it with a sullen significance, heard of the few who hearken intently and carry an eagerly upstrained sense. Hearts that are happiest hold not by it. Better we let then the old view reign. Since there is peace in that, why decry it? Since there is comfort, why disdain? Note not the pigment so long as the painting determines humanity's joy and pain. The Sleep Worker. When wilt thou wake, O mother, wake and see, as one who held in trance this labored, I'm really, the sleep worker. When wilt thou wake, O mother, wake and see, as one who held in trance has labored long, by vacant rote and prepossession strong, the coils that thou hast wrought unwittingly, wherein have place, unrealized by thee, fair growths, foul cankers, right and meshed with wrong, strange orchestras of victim shriek and song, and curious blends of ache and ecstasy. Should that morn come and show thy opened eyes all that life's palpitating tissues feel, how wilt thou bear thyself in thy surprise? Wilt thou destroy in one wild shock of shame thy whole high-heaving firmamental frame, or patiently adjust, amend, and heal? Her reproach. Con the dead page as 'twere live love, press on. Cold wisdom's words will ease thy track for thee. I go, cast off sweet ways, and leave me wan to biting blasts that are intent on me. But if thy object fame's far summits be, whose inclines many a skeleton overlies, that missed both dream and substance, stop and see how absence wears these cheeks and dims these eyes. It surely is far sweeter and more wise to water love than to hoil to leave anon a name whose glory gleam will but advise invidious minds to eclipse it with their own, and over which the kindliest will but stay a moment, musing, he too had his day. Oftentimes in a poet, you find he touches on themes and even turns of phrase that get used over and over again until at some late moment they all just coalesce in one unified, complete, perfect whole, such as to make you think that all of the rest was but rehearsal. I think a lot of Matthew Arnold is that way. Okay, here we're at, I think the two remainders are of the greater sort. Well, I'm going to stick in one of mine here too. This is just a marvelous poem. It's titled A Broken Appointment. You did not come, and marching time drew on and wore me numb, yet less for loss of your dear presence there than that I thus found lacking in your make that high compassion which can overbear reluctance for pure loving kindness' sake. Grieved I when, as the hope hour stroked its sum, you did not come. You love not me, and love alone can lend you loyalty. I know and knew it. But unto the store of human deeds divine in all but name, was it not worth a little hour or more to add yet this? Once you, a woman, came to soothe a time-worn man, even though it be you love not me. I've seen a feminist deconstruction of that, which really slams Hardy for that egocentrism of that, I guess. Thinking that this woman who stood him up should not feel any obligation. Be that as it may, that was a broken appointment. And I call your attention to that line in the last stanza. It starts, you love not me, and it ends, you love not me. And I used that in one of my poems in Against Holy War. So I'll just share that for something different. When I would give myself to you, this sorry lot, I wonder if it can be true, you love me not. When I have waited what seems an eternity, I wonder how by heaven can you love not me. And the final poem, in Auden, there was a poem, As I Walked Out One Evening, which I think I first encountered in a recording by Dylan Thomas. I checked it out from the public library when I was young, an LP, vinyl, I guess you would say now. And he gave a reading of various poems by others, then finally of his own. One of the poems he read was by Hardy, The Ruined Maid. It's not a perfect piece, but I'll try to be more Dylan-esque, and then I will close out this video. The Ruined Maid. O Amelia, my dear, this does everything crown. Who could have supposed I should meet you in town? And whence such fair garments, such prosperity? Oh, didn't you know I'd been ruined, said she. You left us in tatters, without shoes or socks, tired of digging potatoes and spudding up docks. And now you've gay bracelets and bright feathers 3. Yes, that's how we dress when we're ruined, said she. At home in the barton you said thee and thou, and thickoon and theezoon and t'other, but now you're talking quite fitsy for high company. Some polished is gained with one's ruin, said she. Your hands were like paws then, your face blue and bleak, but now I'm bewitched by your delicate cheek, and your little gloves fit as on any lady. We never do work when we're ruined, said she. You used to call home life a hag-ridden dream, and you'd sigh and you'd sock, but at present you seem to know not of megrims or melancholy. True, one's pretty lively when ruined, said she. I wish I had feathers, a fine sweeping gown, and a delicate face, and could strut about town. My dear, a raw country girl such as you be cannot quite expect that. You ain't ruined, said she. So that's more than I realized I had bit off to chew, but it went well. My first Yeats video was about this length. If I wished to devote my time to more of this, I could do, but it really is too time-consuming and too laborious for me to persist. Maybe another day, maybe when we are living in happier times, let's say. So, thank you very much for stopping by my channel.